Hello everyone and welcome to another Fusion 360 Live. My name is Brad Tallis from Autodesk. Today we're going to be continuing to do the patio light that we left off last time doing. We're going to kind of finish this up and make it look a little bit more realistic. So I want to start out by saying my role with the live streams is going to be changing here slightly. So you might not see as much of me. However, please make sure that you have subscribed to the Autodesk Fusion 360 YouTube channel. Make sure you do the notifications on there. You're going to see some cool, new, and exciting stuff coming out on that page. So definitely make sure you're subscribed. Also, I'm fighting a little bit of a cold, so I apologize if my voice sounds funny or if I end up coughing through here. So anyways, let's go ahead and dive right in. So we left off last time. We created this cage using the pipe command, which I thought was kind of a cool idea for creating a complex shape like this. And then we also created kind of a realistic bubbled glass. And again, the end goal for this is to create a realistic rendering, maybe for like a client or something like that. You want to show what your new patio light design is going to look like. So we're going to finish today by creating kind of the sheet metal parts that mounts to the side of the house. So I'm going to start by going into the sheet metal tab. And I want to create a new sheet metal rule. So I'm going to come under Modify, and you're going to see Sheet Metal Rules. In fact, I'm going to go ahead and delete the one I already had in there. You can see we've got a bunch of different sheet metal rules in here. Now, mine might look slightly different than yours because we come out with these default ones. And then you'll notice like aluminum, 0.125, 0.0625, etc., cardboard, plastic. These are all the ones that I've personally added to my design. Now we're going to create a custom one or a new one, and I'm going to base it off of the aluminum inch. And you'll notice when I hover over this, I can either edit or I can create a new rule. And I'm going to say new rule. First thing I'm going to do is give it a name. So I'll say, let's call this 0.05, and then you'll notice it says thickness. Well, I'm going to set that to the thickness that I want, which in this case is 0.05. Now here's something that's kind of cool. You'll notice the miter, rip, and seam gap is set to whatever thickness is. And this is basically when you get to a corner, and I'll show this, is how much space is between the two walls of the sheet metal part. Well, by default it's set to thickness. I want it to be pretty tight, so I'm actually going to do thickness divided by 4. So it's going to use whatever the thickness is, which is 0.05, and it's going to divide that by 4. I also want to change my bend condition, and instead of the relief shape of being round, I'm going to set it to tear. And you'll see this once we start creating the sheet metal part, what that means. And then I'm also going to change some of my corner conditions. Now, I'm not doing any 3 bend intersections. I'm only doing 2 bend intersections. So I'm going to expand that open. And again, you'll notice the relief shape is by default set to round. I'm also going to set it to tear. And I'll show you what those are here in just a second. So I've just created a new material. In fact, I'll click up here. So there's that aluminum 0.05. And we can see the thickness is 0.05. And notice the miter rip seam gap is 0.0125 because we divided that by 4. Okay, so I just created a new rule. And that was it. Now what I want to do is create a sheet metal component, and I'm in my sheet metal tab, so all I have to do is click on a new component, and by default it's set to sheet metal. I'll go ahead and give this a name. I'm going to call it top piece because it's the top piece. And the only thing I need to make sure is that I pick that material that I just created, this aluminum 0.05. I'll go ahead and say OK. The Blue Angels are actually flying, doing an air show this weekend. They're flying over right now. Hopefully it's not too crazy loud. It's making the house rumble. They must be flying right over the house, so I apologize for that. Okay, so I now have this sheet metal part called top piece. Let's go ahead and create a sketch. I'll go ahead and click on here. I also forgot to mention, I'm running solo today, so if you have any questions, please feel free to put them in the chat, and I'll try and save some time near the end to scroll through and take a look at those questions. So, yeah, please feel free, or if there's other people on the chat that can answer those questions, that would be awesome too. Okay, so I'm going to create a sketch. I'm going to do a centered rectangle. This is basically the size of the piece of sheet metal. So I'm going to come in here, and the overall width, I want this to be 6.5. And I'm just going to go ahead and, in fact, I'm going to change shape here a little bit. I'm just going to hit enter like that. I want this to be perfectly square, and you'll notice I only typed in one dimension. Well, now I can come in and say, well, I want this line and that line to be equal in length. So if this is 6.5, this has to be 6.5. So instead of having to type in 6.5 twice, I just did it once, and then I just made them equal. And then all I have to do is change one dimension. So if I make that 8, the other one becomes 8 also. Kind of a cool little tip. Okay, I'm going to finish my sketch. Now I want to use the flange command. So I'm going to say flange. And then I can select the areas that I want to extrude. Now here's something kind of cool. Because I created my sketch on the top face, it actually projected the geometry for me. So you'll notice that it actually projected the holes from these little mounting tabs right there. So I don't even have to create those holes. I'm just selecting everything except for those little hole profiles, and I now have a sheet metal part that's sitting right on top of those tabs, and the holes are perfectly lined up. Okay, the next thing I want to do is create a flange here. So I'm going to select the flange command and grab these 4 edges. And this is where I'm going to show you some of the settings that we did earlier. So I'm going to select those 4 edges. I'm going to start to drag down, and we can see that it's going to create these corners. And I'm going to zoom up a little bit, and you can see that's a pretty tight corner right there. So let me show you what we did. So first thing, I'm going to set the height to be correct, 0.46. I'm sorry, 0.56. I'm going to say override rules. And what this allows me to do is, for example, this bend relief override, you can see I set it to tear. If I set it to straight or round, I don't think you're going to see anything in this example here for the bend relief, because I don't have a bend relief in this example. Let me do the 2 corner. That might make more sense. So you can see it's set to tear. If it was set to round, it would look like this, you know, square, etc. Okay, obviously tear kind of keeps it close together. So that was what that option does right there for the tear option instead of round, because I think it would look kind of weird, you know, having a hole like that in the corner. So that's why I changed it to be tear. Now I don't need to override the rules because it's set this way by default. Okay, so we specified the height and the 4 edges. I'll go ahead and say OK, and we just created a quick sheet metal component called top piece. Now I'm going to create a new component just by right-clicking at the top and say new component. In fact, this isn't going to be a sheet metal component, it's going to be a standard component, just regular metal. So I'm going to change it to standard, and I'm going to call this top mount. And now you'll see I have a new component called top mount. Just like before, I can click on this top face, right mouse click, I'll create a sketch. and I'm going to do a centered rectangle. So R is the shortcut key for rectangle. Now here's another tip. I might have shown this previously. I'm going to cancel out of that. If you right mouse click, you'll see this blue radar and this black line. This is called a marking menu. And you'll notice at 6 o'clock it says sketch. So I'm going to hover over that for about a second, and now you see it kind of brings like almost like a sub menu, and you'll see 2-point rectangle, circle, etc. Okay? Well, all I have to do is right click, drag down. Oops, I'm trying to do it slowly. I'm going to right click, drag down, and go to 2 o'clock, and there's my rectangle command. If I right click and go to like 10 o'clock, there's my circle command. If I just right click and drag straight down, there's my line command. So what is it doing? It's basically going here, into here, and then to 2 o'clock, or to 10 o'clock, etc. So you could use R as the shortcut key, or you could, as you get better at it, you can kind of remember that down and to the 2 o'clock is rectangle. Okay, so I'll go ahead and draw another centered rectangle, and just like I did before, I'm going to say 0.8, and I'm going to change this a little bit so it's more obvious. So I did 0.8. I'll just say these lines are equal with each other, and I get a perfect square. I can see the lines are black, so that means it's fully constrained. I'll say OK. And let's go ahead and extrude this up, also 0.8 in this case. This is kind of like a solid mount that this hangs from, basically. Okay, so the next thing I want to do, and I don't have the light with me, I wish I could show it to you, but there's a piece of metal that comes off from the side and then goes down that mounts to another sheet metal plate. So we're going to use the sweep command again to do that. So I'm going to start by creating a sketch, and then I'm going to put it on this side plane right here. Now you'll notice I can't click on that side plane. It's kind of buried. Here's another tip. I'm just going to click and hold for about a second, and now it's letting me probe through, and there is that YZ plane. Okay, and I'll go ahead and click on that, and it created a sketch right on that YZ plane. And I like to show that because I always see people turning parts on and off in their structure browser. You don't need to do that. You can just click and hold for about a second, and it'll let you probe through. Okay. Okay, I'm going to project this face right here because I need to grab some information from it. And then I'm going to create a line. Now, by default, Fusion tries to create these constraints for me automatically. So if I get near this corner, it's going to try and do a coincident constraint. If I get kind of near the middle, you'll see that little triangle appear, and that's a midpoint constraint. So all I have to do is get kind of near the middle and click, and it's going to create that midpoint constraint for me. So I'm just going to draw a couple lines like so. And then I'm going to come in and dimension them. So I want this line to be, man, the jets are going crazy over the house. Sorry, guys. Of course, they're flying right when I'm having to do a live stream. Okay, so let's make this 3.8, and let's do, and I'm missing the air show. So this is how much I love you guys. So 5.5. I'm going to make that go down 5.5 inches. Okay, so what did I do? I basically created a path coming from the center of this rectangle, or this cube, I should say, coming out and down a very specific distance. Well, now I want to sweep a profile along that path. So I have a couple options. I could just create a sketch on that face, but I want to show you kind of a cool command under construct. There's plane along a path. And this allows me to pick, for example, a path, and it will create a plane that I can put anywhere along that path. And it's really hard to see, but there's like a white dot right there. And so it'll actually snap to the start, the middle, and the endpoints of these lines. So I'm going to drag all the way to the left, and you'll see my distance is basically set to 0. If I come over here, you'll see it's proportional, or I could say, you know, a physical distance. I want it to be 2.5 inches along that line or whatever. You can do either or. I'm just going to go ahead and drag that all the way to the very end of that line. Now, yes, I could have put a sketch on the cubed face, but I just wanted to show the plane along a path. Okay, I'll go ahead and create my sketch. And, jeez. Rectangle. I don't know if you guys can hear that, but the house is rumbling right now. Okay, so let me create a rectangle. I want it to be 0.33 tall by 0.63 wide. So this is my actual profile that I'm going to be sweeping. Now you'll notice I have a sharp corner here, and that's by design. So check this out. I'm going to come in here and say sweep. There's my profile. Here's my path. And notice what it's doing. It's going to take that profile and sweep it along, and it actually makes the corner for me automatically. Now, if I had put a 2D fillet on there, it would actually, you know, bend it around the corner and all that kind of stuff. But this is literally what the light looks like. It's these two pieces of metal. I'll go ahead and join those together like so. And we've now created kind of this mounting arm, if you want to call it that. Okay, now I want to round over the edges of these. So here's a cool trick. I'm going to start with the fillet command. Now I typically click on an edge, right mouse click, and say fillet. I mean, that's what I usually do. But I want to fillet a whole bunch of edges at the same time. So I'm going to say fillet. And then it's asking, what do you want to fillet? Well, I can actually click on the extrude feature, and I'm going to click on the sweep feature. And notice it basically grabbed everything that has to do with the extrude and with the sweep. And now when I come in and type in 0.02, watch what it does. It fillets every single edge that had to do with the extrude and the sweep. So I didn't have to manually click those. So neat little tip, you can actually select features out of the timeline and it will fillet all edges of that particular feature. So I'll go ahead and say okay. And then I think while I'm here, I'm going to go ahead and change the appearance. So I'll come into modify appearance, or shortcut key of A. And because I'm continuing with my existing design, it remembered my powder coat that we used last time. So I'm just going to drag powder coat there. And this was that brown material. If I zoom up, you'll see it's got some bumpy texture to it and stuff like that. It's kind of the same color as the patio light. And I'll do the same thing to the top piece. So let me go ahead and look at there. So you can see I dragged the material onto the top piece, and we can see that it has that texture. Okay, in fact, let's just go ahead and activate the whole thing, and we can kind of see we've now created this, rain guard, this top cover. And the last thing we need to do is mount this to another sheet metal part. So let me take a look at the questions real quick. I have to look over at this other screen. Oh, John, thank you for the very kind comment. I appreciate that. Oh, so Neil asked, does anyone know if these dimensions are in millimeters? No, I am doing inch on this project. You can kind of see right there. I try and go back and forth between metric and inch to try and make everybody happy. Thank you for asking that. A lot of people are saying, awesome teacher, all that kind of stuff. Thank you so much. I appreciate that. I'm not leaving. It's just our roles are changing a little bit and stuff like that. Even some changes on our team. I'm going to be a lot busier, all that kind of stuff. So I'm not leaving or anything like that. So you'll still see me on future live streams, but you're going to see even better live streams, I think. So, okay. So I want to create another sheet metal component, and let's jump back to the sheet metal tab. Click on new component. I'm going to go ahead and give it a name. So let's call this, I'm going to call it back mount. And I'm just basically using the exact same material, so you can see aluminum 0.05 from this design. I'll say OK, and it's going to create a new sheet metal part called back mount. And I wanted to create a sketch right on this back face. It's kind of hard to see when it's ghosted out, but I'm going to click on this back face right here, create a sketch, okay, and then I'm going to project. Now, I need to be a little bit careful. Let me show you something that can bite you if you're not being too observant. Remember, I put a fillet all the way around these edges, so if I were to project this face right here, the part is actually up to there. If I rotate isometrically, you can kind of see right there is actually the top of the part. Then there's this fillet right here. Let me zoom up even more. There's the fillet, and then here's that back face. So I want to make sure that this sheet metal part is actually going to line up with this face right here. So when I go to project, I don't want to just click on this face. I'm going to go ahead and click on either this top edge or this fillet. It doesn't really matter. So I'll just do that. Hopefully that kind of makes sense. Because of those fillets, I need to make sure I'm clicking the right edge, because we're going to use some information from there. Now I'm going to create a rectangle, and let's make it 4 inches wide by 6.5. And also I am following along with my outline that I usually do. I did put it in the description of this live stream on the YouTube channel, so feel free to download that and go through this at your own time. I try and include these outlines so you can kind of walk through and see what I'm actually doing when I'm creating these parts. Okay, so I created this rectangle out here in space. You'll notice the lines are blue, so it's not fully constrained. I want the center of this line to be at the center of the top of that guy. So I'm going to say midpoint. And I'll click on this line here. And then I want to make sure I'm clicking that top edge right. See, I need to make sure I'm not doing the bottom edge, but that edge right there. And you'll notice it brought the rectangle and it perfectly centered it. So it's exactly where it needs to be. So give me half a second here. Okay. Now my dog's scratching to come downstairs because she's freaked out with the airplanes. That's so funny. You can hear her down here now. Okay. It's one of those live streams. Okay, so let's go. I created my rectangle where I want it to be. I'll say finish sketch. I'm creating a sheet metal part, so I'm going to say flange. Now I need to be careful because there's actually going to be multiple profiles. So I'm going to select that profile and that profile. Now notice the result. So there's actually another little profile right there to get the whole thing. I'll say okay, hopefully. Sometimes it does this. I'm not 100% sure why. Let me try that again. I'm not sure why it was complaining. Let me go flange. And oops, a little fast. There we go. And I'm not sure why it's not letting me say okay. That's interesting. So, odd. So let me go to a different command, and that sometimes causes it. Yep. Okay. So it created that flange for me, and now I'm going to add the outside edges. So grab those, that guy, that one down there. I like to start to pull to kind of see what it's going to look like. Nice tight edges. The overall thickness of this, I think, is going to be, let me take a look at my notes really quick, 0.8. And I'll say OK. And we now have this kind of sheet metal part. This is where the wiring kind of is hidden and all that kind of stuff. Now, I need to create some holes through here that it's going to mount to the outlet box on the side of the house. So I'm going to create a quick sketch on this face. And I'm going to use the hole command. And with the hole command, typically you click one spot. Well, there's an option in there to click multiple spots. So I'm going to actually, in my sketch, I'm going to say create a point. I'm just going to randomly click 2 points like that, just wherever. Then I want to say this point and this point are in line with each other. So if one moves, the other has to move. Okay. Then I can come in and dimension exactly where I want one of these holes. So I'll say from that edge to that edge, I want to be 0.7. And from there to that edge, I want to be 3.2 down. So you can kind of see that one's constrained. This one is not yet, but if all I have to do is tell it where it needs to be left to right. So I'm going to say from that edge to that edge. And I want it to be the same as this. I'm just going to click on that existing dimension and hit enter. And now these are perfectly symmetric with each other. And they're lined up with each other. And if I were to change this, that one would have to change also. Okay? So instead of duplicating dimensions and having to type in 3.2 and all that kind of stuff, or having to type in 0.7 this way, you can reference existing dimensions or use constraints to help you with your sketch. So there's those 2 points. So now I can come in and create a hole. And this is the option I was talking about. By default, it's usually set to at point, single hole. Then there's from sketch, multiple holes. So I'm going to click on that. And it says, what are the sketch points? I just have to get near that point. I'll click, get near that point and click. And you'll see that there's 2 holes. Let me make these larger so you can kind of see what they look like. There's 2 holes, excuse me, right at those points. Okay, I will go ahead and set them to be the correct size. I think they are 0.2 in diameter. I want them to be simple holes. I don't need them to be tapped, so they're simple. Distance, I am going to come in here and say I want them to go to this other face. And that will make sure if this thickness changed, those holes will still go all the way through the part. Okay. I could even do a flat drill point because there's really no drill point here. I'll say okay. Okay. Now here comes some fun stuff. I want to put a like a cap nut on here. So I'm going to go out to McMaster-Carr. So insert McMaster-Carr component. I'm going to make this screen a little bit bigger so you can kind of see everything. Now I could do a search for, go into nut and then do, cap nuts and all that kind of stuff. But to save time, I wrote down the number. So I'm going to just type in the McMaster-Carr number, which is this. And when I hit enter, it'll actually take me right to the one that I want, which is this 18.8 stainless steel. And I'll go ahead and say download. Now the reason I showed this is because I know some people will actually go out to McMaster-Carr in a web page. They'll search for their result and then just type the number in here to download it. Or I could have gone through and filtered through and picked the particular size. But to save time, I just did the number. So I'm going to say download, and it brings it right into Fusion. I think this is pretty amazing. Now it's kind of pointing the wrong direction, so I'm going to rotate 90 degrees like so. I'm just going to bring it out here a little bit In fact, I might move it a little bit closer to where it needs to be, something like that. Now I'm still in this move copy command, and I was just doing this free move, which allowed me to rotate it, move it around like so. But there's an option in here called point to point. So I'm going to say point to point. Where do I want to go from? So my origin point, I'm going to hover over this circular edge right here. Now it's really hard to see, but there's a blue plus right in the middle, right in the axis. If I kind of rotate, you might see it a little bit better. There's that blue plus. All I have to do is click on this edge, and it's going to capture that first point. Then all I have to do is click on target point, get near this edge, and you'll see that little blue plus kind of appear. So I'll click there, and it moved it from one point to the other point. And because we picked the center of the nut on that back face, it's exactly centered on the hole on this front face. I'm going to go ahead and capture the position. Now you might ask, well, wouldn't you use a joint command to do this? Absolutely, you could. But we have a free move, basically. When I inserted it, it's allowing me to move it. So why not move it where it needs to be in the first place? And then you're going to see we're actually going to capture or create what's called a rigid joint. Because they're all where they need to be, we'll capture them as rigid joints. So you'll see that here in just a second. Okay, so we brought that in from McMaster-Carr. I want to do another one, but instead of having to bring it in from McMaster-Carr, here's another little tip. I'm going to right-click on it in the browser and say move/copy. Now you'll notice we also have copy. I could do either, but this is basically two steps in one. So I'm going to go ahead and do the move copy. Now here is the trick. Okay, there is a methodology to this. Watch what happens. I'm going to purposely make a mistake here. The first thing I want to do is click on create copy. But if I go in and change this, notice what happens. It unchecks it for whatever reason. So I usually kind of work my way down. I'm like, okay, I want to make sure I'm doing a point to point. So I click on that. Then I'm going to say create copy. Then I'm going to come in and say, what's my origin point? Now here's another tip. My origin point is buried behind this nut a little bit. Well, what if I were to look at the back side? I can actually see the back of the hole. And if I pick this back edge here, I could pick this other back edge over here, and it's the exact same distance as if I had selected the front edge, for example. So my origin, I'm just going to pick this back edge. My target is going to be that back edge. Notice it says create copy, so it did create a copy. And it's perfectly positioned where it needs to be. You just have to make sure you're picking the right edge. If I were to have picked the inside edge, it would have been floating off of the part a little bit. So I'll go ahead and say OK. And we've pretty much finished what this looks like. So remember I said just a few minutes ago, I'm going to do a rigid group. So I'm going to come under Assemble, Rigid Group. And I'm going to say these two nuts, the back mount, this top mount, and even this sheet metal part are basically like almost like a subassembly. I'm going to group all those together. I'll say OK. And now if I grab that, you'll see they all move together. And you can kind of think of this as like a subassembly. You know, this screws up into these guys, right? So that's why I used that point-to-point option instead of a joint option. And then I just did a rigid group. I'll do the appearance also. Let's go ahead. I'll activate the top level here. I'll do an appearance. I'll drag this powder coat. If I drag it to 1, because it's a copy, it's going to do it to both. So there we are. That's pretty much the design of the lamp. Well, now we want to create the socket and the light bulb to create a realistic rendering. Well, I use the word create the socket and create the light bulb, but that would take a long time. I'm betting that there's already a light bulb that I could use and a socket I could use out on my GrabCad or TurboSquid or whatever. There's, I would go out and search. You might even look in McMaster-Carr, parts for CAD, etc. Lots of different options there. So I'm going to go out to GrabCAD, bring it over here. I really like GrabCAD. It's a really cool web page, and I can search. So I could do a search for lamp socket or something like that, for example, and it's going to come up and list a whole bunch, of different options. In fact, here's some light bulbs, all that kind of stuff. And here is one of the ones we're going to grab. Now, I'm going to search for a very specific one. So I'm going to call it ceramic socket for an E27 lamp. And that comes up with these three. I want to grab this last one here, so I'm going to click on it. Now, with GrabCAD, you do have to sign in, but it's free. It doesn't cost anything. So I'm already logged in as me, so you can kind of see that here. I'm going to scroll down, and you'll notice it says download files. This will download a zip file of everything that's in here, and you can see there's some renderings, there's some JPEGs, some SolidWorks parts, but then there's a step file in here, and honestly that's all I really need. I mean, I could bring in these SolidWorks parts, but I'm just going to hover over this step file, and it's kind of hard to see, but there's this little down arrow right here, and I'm going to say download, and it just grabbed that step file. I'll go back into Fusion, expand open my data panel. Now I've already done it to save time, but all I'd have to do is say upload, select the file, and here is that step file right there. So I'd click on it and say open. I'm not going to because it takes some time to upload it in there. But you'll see it brought that in. I also did the exact same thing for a light bulb, which we'll get to in just a second. So here is that step file. So all I have to do now is right mouse click and say insert into current design. This patio light is my current design. In fact, I should probably save it. Let's go ahead and save it first. I'll say okay. Then I'll go ahead and insert into current design. Not sure why that was loud. So I'll go insert into current design, and it brings it in. Now it's kind of inside the part. I'm going to go ahead and drag this out a little bit, and just like I did with the cap nut, I'm going to rotate this so it's kind of pointing in the correct direction. Okay. And I'll do the exact same thing that I did before. Is I can do point to point. Now, I'm not going to right now. I'm just going to go ahead and leave it where it is and say okay. And let's take a look at this. If I expand this open, we can actually see it's made out of three separate components. So there's like that threaded component, and there's the contact, and then the ceramic part. So if I were to grab one of these, you're going to see they're not going to move with each other. So I like to just right mouse click at the top level and say rigid group. Include the child component. So it's going to include everything underneath it. I'll say okay. And now if I grab that, it's going to move it all as a rigid group. So kind of a really quick way of, if the part you bring in has a whole bunch of stuff in it, you could just right click at the top level and say, I want them to move all at the same time. Okay. The next thing I want to do is I need to know, I want to line up the center of this hole with the inside of this part up here, but then that would cause these little standoffs to stick up through the part. In fact, let me show you what I mean by that. So I'm going to create a joint. Let me minimize this guy real quick. The component 1, which one do I want to move? I want to move this socket, so I'm going to click there. Where do I want to go to? Well, I'm going to turn off the glass, and I could even turn off the cage. And notice when I hover over this face, it has like the center of the holes, but there's also this square point. That's the center of the face. So I'm going to go ahead and click there, and you're going to see it moved the socket exactly centered, but notice those little standoffs are sticking up through the part. So how do we fix this? Well, I'm going to do a quick measurement. So I'm going to go into Inspect, Measure. I'm just going to click one of these top faces, and then I'm going to click that face there. And notice it says the distance is 0.079. Also notice as I hover over the number, it says click to copy to the clipboard. So I'm just going to click on that number. Okay? That's all I had to do. Then I'm going to say joint. We'll do the exact same thing again. I'll say that point there. Turn my glass and cage back on because I undid it. I'll click on that point there. Okay, we get the exact same result. But notice this up and down arrow. I'm going to start to drag this direction, and you can see that's the offset Z. Okay, and now right now it's almost an inch basically. Well, all I have to do is paste, so Control V, and it pasted that measurement into there, and so it moved it down 0.079. So those standoffs are exactly flush with that face. I'll say OK, and we've now created a rigid joint of the socket to the top there. Okay. Now you're probably wondering, what about the wiring? I can't go through this. Well, like I said, this is a rendering. I'm not making it for manufacturing. In reality, these are all hollow and stuff, but I just wanted to create a rendering of the product to the customer. To manufacture it, that'll be some different steps, right? Okay, so I'm going to do the exact same thing again. We'll come out here to GrabCAD. I'll do a search under the library. And I think it's just called Edison bulb. It's kind of a cool looking bulb. So let me just, let me do a search for Edison bulb. And you'll see lots of different options here. I went ahead and just picked this first one. Kind of a cool rendering, but that's kind of what the light looks like. I'm going to scroll down and notice this one has a whole bunch of SolidWorks parts, but as I keep going, there's an IGES file. I don't see a step file this time, but there's an IGES file. So I did the exact same thing. Click download, go into my project, say upload, and there's the bulb. So I would just say select file, and there's the IGES file right there. Again, to save time, I'm not going to do it because it takes 30 seconds or whatever to upload. So here's that bulb. I'm going to do the exact same thing. I'm going to say insert into current design. It's going to bring it in kind of down there. I'll rotate this around. Now I'm just going to check. I think they're actually lined up. So I'm just going to drag this vertical. Now I'm just going to drag it till it looks good, because like I said, it's a rendering. I'm not worrying about the threads that are hidden or anything like that, but I'm just going to go ahead and bring the bulb like into the socket, something like that, for example. And it looks like it's perfectly centered. I could be very specific. I could say, minus 8.5 or something like that if I wanted to. I'll just do 8.4 in this case. Say OK, and there is our light bulb. Okay. So, you'll notice when we insert things into Fusion, they have these little links. Now, what that means is I can't really change these models unless I were to actually open up the physical model itself in a separate design. But I can always right-click and say break link. I'm not going to go into too much detail about this. I've covered this previously. You know, if you insert a whole bunch of things into your design, you basically, they're like references and they're linked to the original model. You would go back to the original model to make the change. In this case, I don't care too much. I just want to break the link because I want to be able to change some appearances of this. So, I'm at a good spot here. I'm going to go ahead and save. I'll say OK. And I'm going to hit A for appearance. In fact, let's go ahead and change into the render workspace just so we can kind of see what this is going to start to look like when we actually render these out. So you can kind of see, you know, there's the brown material, but then there's this weird looking light bulb. Okay, so the first thing I'm going to do is I want to change the outer shell of the light bulb to be glass, because right now it's almost like, it looks like a plastic or something, right? So I'm going to expand open the light bulb, and we can see that there's quite a few models in here, and I'm just going to keep working my way through. You can't really see them because it's not glass yet, but B14 is basically the outside, or the bulb, the glass part of it. So I can turn that on or off, and there's all the internals of the light bulb. So B14 is the one I want to change. So I'm going to change the appearance, make this a little bit bigger so you can kind of see it. I'm going to go into glass. I want to do a smooth glass. And you can see we have a bunch of different ones in here. Well, there's one called glass clear. So I'm just going to drag that over here onto B14. And it says it already has an appearance. Well, I want to go ahead and remove the existing one and replace it with the glass. So I'm going to say remove, and now you can see that it is made out of glass. Okay. So I'm going to go ahead and turn this off so we can kind of have access to this. These are all the little filaments that are going to glow, and we're actually going to simulate that. So I'm going to minimize my glass, and there is a material called emissive, and it's under miscellaneous. And you'll notice there's actually a material in here called air. This is a really cool option. If you ever want something not to show up in your rendering, just turn it to air and it won't show up, but it still exists as a model, which is kind of cool. I'm going to go to emissive, and you'll notice under here we have a couple different options. So we have this frosted bulb and this LED bulb. I'm going to go ahead and download, because I don't have it current right now. I'm just going to go ahead and click download on those guys. And I'm just going to drag this frosted bulb onto one of these yellow pieces here. Okay. And you'll notice it turns kind of white. Now here's another tip, just from me practicing with this, we can see that there's a whole bunch of B19 materials, or I should say objects. These are all of the filaments. So I'm going to select all of these B19s, including that mirrored one. So that's all of the filaments, and I'm just going to do the exact same thing. I'm just going to drag that material onto that, and we should see that they all turned white. So instead of having to do one at a time and all that kind of stuff, and it's hard to see, but there's actually little metal pieces going down inside of it. I might have accidentally clicked on one of those, so I just did it on all of the filaments. Now, let's take a look at what happens here. I'm going to go ahead and just do an in-canvas render. We don't have the glass turned on. I did that on purpose because glass causes lots of refractions and stuff like that, which takes longer to render. Here, you know, we can get through some iterations fairly quickly, but you'll notice it doesn't really look like it's emitting very much light. So check this out. I'm going to leave my rendering. I'm going to bring up my appearance dialog. And then here's that material, that frosted bulb. And notice it's kind of hard to see, but it says 800 lumens, which isn't very much. So I'm going to edit this. In fact, actually it's set to 10,000 lumens. So I'm going to change that 10,000. Let's do something like closer to like 30,000 or something. So I'm just typing in 30,000. And it's going to start to re-render a little bit, but now I'm starting to see some light casting a little bit. I mean, just ever so barely. So 30,000 isn't enough. So let's try maybe something bigger than that. Let's try like 70,000. Okay, and again, it takes a little while to do this, and I'll show you a trick. I'm going to come into, let me go ahead and say done. I'm going to go into my render settings and change this resolution. I'm going to crank that down to like 20. And notice it's rendering much, much faster. Not as nice, but we're already at 20, 30 iterations or whatever. So this is what I typically do when I'm, checking lighting and stuff. I will crank that down to limit the resolution. Then I can come in and edit this guy. We're at 70,000. It still doesn't look like that's enough. So let's do like 103,000 or something like that. And that will cast much more light into the scene. Oops, I rotated. I can also change the particular color that I want. And again, it's kind of weird that it's not casting the light that I expected it to. Let me try a different material. Usually it like really illuminates this. So let me try this guy on the B19. So let me just select those again really quick. I'll try this LED material on there. And then let's go ahead and edit that guy. And let's try 109 or something like that. Let's see if... Interesting. I am not having much luck on today's. There we go. Let me just. Maybe I just have to be way higher numbers. I was just using the notes that I had, so I'm just going to drag that slider, and now you can see that definitely it's casting more light. It's emitting more light. So, I can crank that all the way up, etc. Again, running short on time, so I'm not going to spend too much time on that, but you basically can change the amount of luminance. I also want to change the color slightly. Right now it's almost a pure white. If I were to come in here and do more of a yellow or something like that, it's going to cast a little bit more of a yellow tint. So you can actually pick, does your LED light cast a blue tint, or is it a soft yellow or something like that? So I'm going to do maybe something up in here like so. Okay. Now I'm going to go ahead and turn the glass back on, and you'll see a significant difference when I do that, because now it's going to refract through the light. Through the glass. So let's turn that back on. Hit the little eyeball, and it'll start to re-render, and you're going to see what that looks like and how it's actually, diffusing the light even more. So obviously I have it set pretty bright in this example. And that is pretty much it. So to do my final render, I'm going to go ahead and stop this render. Excuse me. I'll turn on all of the parts that I want to have displayed. So I want to turn on the cage and the glass, like so. I would spend some time specifying, what does my overall brightness or my environment look like. So right now it's set to skylight. I'm going to do, maybe let's just do a cool light or something, just to change the surrounding lights, or a warm light. I'll just do that. See if that brings out some color. I can come in here and change the ambient lights. You can kind of see what that does by changing the ambient light. So I'm going to leave it such like so. And then finally I would turn this from 20 back up to 100. And when I hit render, it's going to now emit. You can cast shadows. You can see, again, it's going to take a while to render, but it's casting a lot of light on this back face here. You can kind of see the shadows of the cage, etc. Okay, so while that's rendering, I'm going to glance over at the questions, see if there was any questions in here. So, Ray Jean said, thanks you for all the tips and tricks. I appreciate that. Ethan says, the whole command is wonderful. I totally agree. It's an extremely powerful command. And I hope I didn't just... Oops. Sorry, guys. I just killed my session. Hopefully we're still streaming. I'm sorry, I pressed a wrong button. Let me look at the chat in this window here. Okay. Whole command is wonderful. It automatically adds the specs to the drawings. Yep, very good point. Let's see. Yeah, so Ethan said, you know, he uses joints. Okay. And let me go back to the questions over here. Okay. Oh, so Danny asked a really good question. Does the objects from GrabCad, do they come in? Man, give me a second here. Sorry. He asked the question, do the objects from GrabCad automatically come in with materials? And sometimes they do, sometimes they don't. It depends. Like, I think on IGIS files, it might come in with colors. But if there's like custom materials that they use, like a brick texture or something like that, the chances are probably not. So good question on that. Okay, let me get back here. Okay. Okay. With that, I apologize. It was kind of a crazy live stream today, running it solo, and then with the jets flying over and my dog freaking out, all that kind of stuff. Hopefully you learned something new. I did see a lot of comments about, we're going to miss you on the live streams. I'm not stopping the live streams. I just might not be doing them as often. There's going to be a lot of other material going to be coming out from a lot of other people, and I'm really excited about that. So please make sure, if you haven't already, subscribe to our channel. We're always putting out short tips and tricks, you know, a 3-minute video about nesting, or, you know, a 5-minute video about joints and stuff like that. So you're going to see a lot more stuff like that coming down the pipeline. So with that, I wanted to thank everybody for attending, and I hope you have a wonderful rest of your day and have fun fusioning. Thank you.